What if World War III happened today? World War III is often a pretty highly discussed topic, usually around times when tensions are high, like when the Ukraine war just started or stuff that happened in Iran in 2020. But we're going to see a scenario where World War III happened today. Of course, we're going to use the present day war borders between Russia and Ukraine right now, which will hopefully cement this a bit stronger. So, to start off, Ukraine begins their spring offensive and pushes back Russia. All the way back, and they're nearing Crimea. So what does Russia decide to do? Well, what Russia does is they decide to nuke the cities of Kharkiv and Odessa, which ultimately triggers a NATO response. And NATO's like, Russia, if you do one more action, one more invasion, we're going to declare war on you. And they send lots, even more than they already have. They're sending lots of military and economic aid to Ukraine to help them cope with the nukes. So, of course, Russia ignores their response, and with the help of Belarus, they begin a counteroffensive in the north, which ultimately leads NATO to being like, all right, we're done with this. We're going to invade you guys, which was also triggered by a missile from Belarus accidentally going into Poland instead of Ukraine. This little sliver of land right here, it landed basically about a couple miles from the border, so they were not deep into Poland territory. So, of course, this triggers a NATO response, and all of NATO declares war on Russia. Now, of course, there are some exceptions to this. I mean, Hungary is kinda has good relations with Russia. So, Hungary actually doesn't follow Article 5 and doesn't declare war on Russia. So, what does NATO do? Well, what they do is they go ahead and invade Hungary, and they do it pretty easily. And a new government is set up in Hungary, and of course, they follow along with the United States, of course. So, what's Russia's first course of action for this war? Well, what they do is they begin a ruthless assault on Ukraine, trying desperately to take Kiev and ending the war. And they almost succeed in doing it, but they are pushed back. Another stalemate is formed, this time with more Russian lines on the side, but it would take a while for US troops to arrive. So in this, Russia decides to unite with Belarus, well, basically annexing Belarus, and they quickly go ahead and invade the Baltic countries before the United States arrive. They invade them pretty easily, start an invasion of Poland, but Poland is pretty strong here, so they get pushed back and are forced to be in a stalemate. Finland, which has a lot of defenses, manages to push back the Russian advance and even manages to invade into Russian territory. Although some attacks are repelled, they still hold out with their attack in the north, and they repulse their attack in the south. Now, of course, Europe isn't the only front in this war. There's also some fronts in Asia and Africa and stuff like that. Africa, the states of Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt are on the side of the United States, and the states of Algeria and Libya are on the side of Russia. Of course, right away, Algeria and Libya, of course, the war is still going on, but we're going to go on separately just to make it easier. So, of course, Libya and Algeria launch an attack against Tunisia. However, with the help of Italian troops, they do manage to push them back, but only partly. Another stalemate is formed. Man, there's a lot of stalemates. Then Morocco decides to invade the Algerian desert, and Western Sahara decides to revolt against Morocco in declaring independence. Now, of course, this goes fairly well because Moroccan troops are focused on Algeria, and they've pretty much pulled out of this entire region. So Western Sahara unofficially declares independence. However, with the help of Spanish and Portuguese troops, I mean, Spain and Morocco don't really have good relations, but this is a war right now, so they work out their differences, which I don't know if that's real or not. But using the Canary Islands and this island right here as a base, I forgot what this island is called. But using the Canary Islands and this island as a military base, they successfully managed to recapture Western Sahara and they give it back to Morocco. I mean, Spain got to have their former colony for, like, I don't know, a few days. So, yeah. Ah, dang it. So, with Italo-Tunisian troops slowly pushing back the Algerian-Libyan advance, and Morocco pretty much rapidly taking the Algerian desert because there's nobody there. Even though Algeria did push them back a little bit, and that there's some back and forth fronts happening. This is basically what the front lines look like. Egypt did launch an assault in the east. However, of course, like all attacks, that would be quickly repelled. However, like a month later, they would come back and conquer their regions. Now, of course, the situation of Israel and Palestine is pretty lopsided. I mean, Israel probably go in the United States and Palestine would go into Russia. I'm sure that Syria and Iraq would be on the side of Russia as well as Iran. And I'm sure that Armenia would be on the side of the United States as well as Georgia. No, Armenia would be on the side of Russia. So will Georgia and Azerbaijan. Now, the United States has better relations with Armenia than Azerbaijan. The reason why Armenia joined on the side of Russia is because, for one, they're a part of the CSTO, and for two, Armenia joined on the side of the United States first, so it wouldn't really make sense for them to be on the same side of wars. So these are just joined on Russia. Now, immediately, Russia goes for Georgia's disputed regions, and they successfully take them. However, Turkish forces immediately try to rescue the regions, and these provinces are way too big, but they do launch an invasion in the Circassian coast right here. That is repelled, but not the Abkhazian one. The Abkhazian one is given back to Georgia, and they repel the South Ossetian one because Russia is too focused on Europe right now. Now, Russia does launch an attack in Ukraine, like a few months before the African front happens, and they managed to successfully surround Kiev. I just want to know if this is actually Kiev. Okay, they capture Kiev. They captured Kiev, and they surround a front here. The Ukrainians managed to rescue them. However, the Ukrainian situation is looking pretty dire. Their capital is lost. However, they still will not give up. And as Polish forces arrive to help Ukraine, they push back the Russian advance, and another stalemate is formed. Man, there's a lot of stalemates. So Russia's pretty much stuck right now in this front. They do advance a little bit on Poland, but not much. But in the Middle East, this is where things get heated. Of course, Turkish, Georgian, and Azerbaijani forces quickly crack down on Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan quickly capitulates, being partitioned by Azerbaijan and Turkey for the time being. In the Middle East, of course, Syria and Iraq have their little civil war going on, so they're kind of in shambles, and the citizens don't really like them joining the war when they're literally in a civil war. So another revolt happens, and they pull out of the war. So Turkish forces retreat out of Syria and Iraq, and Israel and Palestine go to war, and with the support of with the support of the United States. I don't know. The Middle East, it's just insane. But with the support of the United States, Israel successfully captures Palestine. Of course, Egypt is not really too happy about that, but they're on the same side, so they can't really do anything about it unless something happens, of course. Lebanon stays neutral, I think. I don't know. Saudi Arabia joins in and tries to launch an invasion against Iran, but of course Iran is separated, so it doesn't really do anything. But Iran does launch an invasion into the Azerbaijan. No, not that much. But they do launch an invasion against the Azerbaijani exclave and try to liberate Armenia, which goes half successfully, but most of Armenia is still controlled by Turkey, so they have to wait on that. Kazakhstan is still neutral, and Russia decides to launch another invasion into Georgia. This time, with more troops, they manage to regain their ground and even push into Turkey. Now, Turkey does repel this attack, but not much. The Russians still manage to gain their ground, and they even go into Azerbaijan. Now, that stays like that for a little bit. However, Iran and Russia do manage to partition Azerbaijan in half. Of course, what else would they do? And Turkey is left all alone in the Middle East. Well, they do receive some support from Egypt and Israel, but that's pretty much it. In the Ukrainian front, the Russians launch yet another counteroffensive. How many counteroffensives are there? Jeez. However, this attack does go successfully, and Ukraine is forced to capitulate. Now, this is a massive blow for the countries of NATO, because then Russia has a lot of ground here. So let's see what Russia does with Ukraine. So Ukraine is severed in half, one half going to Russia, and the other half becoming a Ukrainian puppet state. And this puppet state will help the Russians gain ground in other countries like Slovakia, Poland, Romania, and Moldova, which they're going to go for next. Now, with the support of Transnistria and stuff, Moldova is pretty easy to take, but once they get into Romania, that is a bit difficult. Romania is definitely a lot stronger than Moldova, and they really want to liberate their Moldovan brother because Romania and Moldova are best friends. So that attack doesn't really go so well. They do launch a southern attack in Poland. That doesn't really go so well. It just ends up being just two random bits of land right here. And they even try to launch an invasion against Finland, which ends up going really badly because their soldiers end up freezing. And because of this, they're forced to abandon their Polish ambitions to focus on other things, of course. And that focus is on Turkey. They go in and they go about this far to the Turkish lands. And unfortunately, Turkey does deal with some Kurdish rebels, but they managed to hold them off just for now, because the Kurdish rebels don't really want to be under Russian control. And the Turks managed to push back the advance, but not for long, as they push back again. I don't know why I keep on doing pushbacks and stuff, but whatever. Also, using Crimea as a base, they launch an invasion into northern Turkey, and this actually goes pretty well, but it is pretty limited, and trench warfare is soon fought there as well. Turkey also blockades the Bosphorus Strait, except for Romania and Bulgaria. And of course, they don't block any ships from Georgia leaving, from escaping. They're going to the Bosphorus Strait and going into Greece, Italy, France, any country which is safe. They let them through. So, on the African front, let's go into the African front. So, Morocco still is pushing back. Tunisia has pushed them back again. And they've even gotten to Libya. Now, Libya is pretty strong. I don't know if they're pretty strong, but they're not that strong. But they're no match for Egypt, which takes over Tripoli, and Libya capitulates. Now, with Libya capitulate, I don't know why I'm taking so many lands. They're not invading the desert at all. But, well, Tunisia isn't. Tunisia goes for the northern lands. It does take a few months of difficult and painful difficult and painful resistance, but nevertheless, they manage to capitulate Algeria, and the African front is abolished for now. Now, this is also the time that Serbia decides to join the war on the side of Russia. And I think you can say for yourself, but they get absolutely pummeled by Romanian, Croatian, Bosnian, Montenegrin, Kosovoan, Albanian, Macedonian, and Bulgarian forces. So yeah, Serbia is then reduced to a puppet state, and Kosovo is given independence with talks of joining Albania now that there is no threat. Other countries also get some land, like Croatia, Romania, and Bulgaria, all getting some land for themselves. Now, in the Ukrainian offensive, they managed to regain some territory because the Ukrainian soldiers are pretty exhausted in the Polish fronts, and they managed to gain some ground in Ukraine, even pushing back as gaining their former Bessarabian lands, and even going a bit further. Now, while this attack is repelled, they still manage to keep a little bit of their advances inwards. Now, an incident that happened in the port of Stockholm, in which Russian ships sank a Swedish tanker or ship, whatever, a civilian ship. Then Sweden decides to join the war on the side of Russia. They were neutral, but now, since that incident, they decided to join the war against Russia. With this new morale boost, and with American troops finally arriving in larger numbers because they weren't really sending as many troops as before, they were now pushing back Russia. Now, since Kaliningrad is way too overdefended, they decide to go for the Belarusian front, which is a little bit less defended. It is still pretty defended, but it's a lot less defended. And of course, Ukrainian rebels are taking place in major cities in Ukraine. And of course, Russia has to put those down, so those even less troops to worry about Poland. However, they do divert troops over to Poland, and they do push back Poland, but Poland still manages to keep some of their advances as they keep on moving. And Poland does not leave the puppet state of Ukraine alone as they go in for the attack. They take over a bunch of territories, and with the help of Romania, take back Kiev, whatever. But Russia does not want this to happen and immediately sends an emergency invasion of the Ukrainian puppet state, which ultimately leads in the Ukrainian puppet state getting partitioned, with Russia taking Kiev for themselves. Now, back to the trench warfare zone. Of course, Turkey managed to pull them back because Russia lacked the supplies, and Turkey basically closed off the entire Black Sea to them. I don't know how you can do that when Russia literally owns half the Black Sea at this point. But Turkey is starting to push back Iranian forces. They capture the Armenian territories, and they do struggle in the mountains quite a bit, but they do liberate Azerbaijan somehow. I don't know how the Turks are managing to pull this much fronts, probably because a lot of the European fronts are helping them, which is logical. See, American, Dutch, British, French, Romanian forces help them to liberate the Caucasus, and Azerbaijan and Georgia return as independent countries, with Azerbaijan keeping their Armenian conquered thing, their conquered regions of Armenia, and they help in the Iranian advance, which is going along pretty good. I mean, they are struggling quite a bit in the mountains. However, with a sea invasion by Saudi Arabia in the east, it is a bit easier, and they're aiming for this oil-rich region right here, in which they have been massively funding the rebels in Syria and Iraq. You know, the rebels that Turkey supports and Saudi Arabia supports. They support them, and new governments are formed, and they help in the invasions. Now, of course, this doesn't really work out for them as they hoped, because what I just said before was what they had hoped, but that didn't happen. So Saudi Arabia and Turkey worked together to launch an invasion of Syria and Iraq. And they're surprised that it actually goes smoothly because of civil war. So yeah, that happens, and new governments are put in them, and they launch an invasion against Iran. They take over the oil-rich region, and Iran decides, you know what, never mind, we're just gonna leave this war, and Iran leaves the war. They sign an armistice, and here is the little mini treaty. Iran loses some land to Turkey and Azerbaijan, and they have to, of course, pay some reparations, which is pretty much the default treaties. Of course, Iraq doesn't really get any land because they literally just joined the war, but they do get some money, so that's good. Now, with the Polish advance, they help the Belarusian people overthrow, and a new independent Belarus is proclaimed. Now, this, of course, is important because this marks the collapse, well, the start of the collapse of the Russian regime. Polish, American, French, Romanian, German, Swedish, Finnish, and Spanish forces. I don't know how Spain manages to get to this front, but they do. But they help liberate the Baltics. Now, of course, Kaliningrad is still heavily defended, so they still can't get in, but they do manage to get into Latvia and Lithuania pretty easily. They do struggle a bit in Estonia, but with the help of Finland, they managed to take it over, and Finnish forces go in, take over northern territories because there's literally no Russian troops there, and they even threaten the city of St. Petersburg. Now, of course, the situation is looking pretty dire for Russia. Of course, with the new Baltic states. But of course, they still have their Russian exclave, their Kaliningrad Oblast. However, with the weakened Russian troops here, that is quickly taken over by Poland. And then they decide, with Belarusian forces helping, they decide to launch a brutal invasion, not to the people, of course, but they launch a brutal invasion against Russian troops in Ukraine, helped by Belarusian, Polish, Romanian, Ukrainian rebels, American, pretty much the default NATO, pretty much all of NATO is helping in this attack. But we're only showing Romania, Poland, and Belarus in this attack because it just makes a bit more sense. But there is a lot of different troops here. So, yeah. Now, Russia did not expect this counterattack so quickly. So they decided to drop more nukes. They dropped some on Gdansk, Krakow, Cologne. There you go, Cologne, Antwerp. Where's Antwerp? I don't know. Where's Antwerp? Somewhere in here. Antwerp, Vichy, Bordeaux, Madrid. No, not Madrid. Toledo, which is somewhere over here, and Seville. And finally, Syracuse. All the cities that are nuked by Russia. Now, of course, that doesn't do anything. And they respond with more nukes. Nuke Russia. A lot of Russian cities, Rostov-on-Don, St. Petersburg, Moscow itself, Smolensk, which, unfortunately, the radiation does flow into some of the border towns of Belarus, but those towns are quickly evacuated. Now, even with the nukeness, or something like that, Russians are still getting pulled back. And finally, forces surround. Now, of course, while this is happening, the Finnish managed to capture St. Petersburg, but they managed to surround and capture Moscow, and Vladimir Putin is captured and placed in the Hague, or whatever, to await trial. Now that the war is over, let's see what the treaty yields us. Alright, so this is what will happen in the treaty. So let's start in Eastern Europe, of course, or in the Balkans. Serbia will lose a lot of land from Romania, Croatia, and Bulgaria. Bosnia also gets a little piece right here. And Kosovo formally unites with Albania. Now, of course, the Kosovan people are very happy about this, but the Serbian people are not. And the Serbian people, of course, Serbia has to pay some money, and they basically just become a puppet state. Now, regarding Belarus, regarding the new government, they have an agreement they lose a bit of land, and they leave him alone. Now Ukraine is the one that gets a lot of land, because of course they were the one that suffered quite a bit. So yeah, they gain a lot of previously Russian land. I don't know why that was Belarusian, but so yeah, they gain a lot of previously Russian land, and their Crimean dispute is resolved. Now, of course, Georgia and Armenia get some lands here, but because these land masses are so giant, I can't show them. But they do get quite a bit of land, and Armenia is partitioned between Turkey and Azerbaijan. And of course, Turkey and Azerbaijan get some parts of Iran as well. Of course, Iraq doesn't get any. I said that before. Israel and Palestine are reunited, and Libya loses some land and, of course, gets a new government. Same thing with Algeria. Tunisia gets some land. So does Morocco. And for Russia, they lose some. Really? Dang it! This stupid app. I swear, I want to change this so much. But they get their old World War II borders back. I don't know why they decided to do that, but that's the more logical cause, so I guess that's what they're going for. And minor border concessions are granted to Estonia and Latvia, basically returning to their World War II borders as well. Now, there are talks for Romania and Moldova to unite, but that isn't made yet. And, well, that's all. So that's a scenario if World War III happened today.